Hey, it's Andrew here, and in this video, I'm going to be showing you exactly how much house you can afford, or should afford, based on some real-life factors and scenarios, which include cross-referencing your debt-to-income ratios and some other things. But most importantly, this video is geared towards making sure you have more information at your fingertips when making that big decision to either buy your next home or buy your first home. Either way, we'll run through all the numbers in great detail, so with that being said, let's go! All right, so here's the scoop. For anyone looking to purchase a home, you really only have two paths to walk down. Number one, you can choose to maximize your lending leverage to buy yourself that nice big dream home that technically you could afford on paper. Or number two, you can choose to buy a home that fits within a specified budget, which factors in your lifestyle costs, like your hobbies, your toys, cars, movie nights, dinner dates, and hopefully a nice chunk of your income is still going towards your investments. Now, personally, I advocate to walk down path number two here because, well, I like my hobbies and I love growing my investment portfolio more than I care to have that 17-bedroom home. But hey, the choice is completely yours, and we'll work out the numbers and all the different scenarios here. And just a side note, of course, every state and local area is going to be a little bit different in terms of exact figures on how much you can borrow to buy a home, but we're going to be talking in terms of averages here. That way this video applies to the majority of people. So with all that said, let's jump into some whiteboard action here. Okay, so we got our whiteboard in front of us here, and we got this broken down into two main sections. Section number one is where we maximize our lending leverage to buy ourselves that big home. Section number two is a more conservative approach, kind of going with a more specific budgeted home, right? And so we're going to talk about the different scenarios there and also the different income brackets, how much you can make, and then how much home you can afford based on that. So lenders will typically require on a conventional loan, this is pretty standard, that your total obligation ratio should not exceed 36%. What this means is any obligations you have outstanding, like automotive loan payments, student loans, credit card debts, all that stuff, if you add all those expenses up, it can't exceed 36% of your income. So knowing that now, we can break down the math. And by the way, for FHA, it's even higher. It's 43%, sometimes cases higher. I don't recommend, we're not even going to look at this, because when you start getting up into dumping half of your income into your home or your debts, it's not a great place to be, and I don't really recommend that. So we're just going to talk about the conventional route here, 36%. So let's calculate our total obligation ratio. So let's say we have a monthly income of $10,000. Just a round number, is going to be making it a little bit easier to use that. Monthly loan payment, let's just say we're shooting for a $2,800 mortgage payment, right? And we have an outstanding auto loan payment of $500 a month, and any kind of remaining outstanding debts like credit cards, student loans, or whatever, let's say that adds up to be about $300 a month. So knowing that, our total monthly expenses are $3,600, and then if you divide out the monthly income at $10,000, you get 36%. So we're within the envelope here, so everything works out fine. Now with this scenario, you can afford a $450,000 home based on having a 4% interest rate, 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Now, this scenario is $120,000 a year income. That's what we're looking at here, right? Now, let's take the same information and apply it to a more specific budgeted home that's a more conservative route that gives you some more breathing room, right? So let's say instead of going with 36% on our total obligation ratio, which I believe is still a little bit high, let's go to 30%. So knowing that now, let's go ahead and calculate it out again with the same income at $10,000 a month, and we're just going to stick with the same auto loan payment at $500 and the credit card, student loan, any kind of outstanding debt at $300. So if you have this factored in now, let's say a monthly loan payment for a home, you're shooting for $2,000, which, of course, from $10,000 a month income is only 20%. So that's a 20% housing expense ratio. That's a pretty good number to shoot for. Now, if we add it all up, total monthly expenses is $2,800. So we're at 28% now because you divided up by $10,000. 28% is under 30%, so we're good. So now in this example, we're looking at about a $300,000 home at of course, at the 30-year rate, 4% interest rate mortgage. And this scenario kind of allows us more breathing room, right? So now let's take the two scenarios and apply it to the different income brackets, and let's see what happens here. So the income bracket, $60,000 annual income. Your home purchase price with going with the maxed out strategy, the conventional route here is about $150,000. And if you use the more specific budgeted conservative route, at $60,000 income, you can afford a $100,000 home. Now, that's not a lot, so let's bump it up to the next bracket and see what we have here. So again, talking about the same income, $120,000 a year, you can buy yourself almost a $500,000 home based on this scenario, number one. And based on the more conservative situation, we already talked about, $300,000 home based on the $120,000. Now, the last income bracket we'll just go with because it just keeps going, but $180,000 income, if you have that, you're looking at about a $700,000 home on the strategy number one here, and then a $600,000 home based on strategy number two. Now, all this stuff is based on the same numbers being used, the auto loan payment staying the same. Of course, as you bump up in income brackets, typically people spend more money, right? So you might have a higher auto loan payment, which again is going to bring the number back down. So it just depends, and we'll talk about how to formulate your exact situation on paper here so that you can apply it. So if you want to take an easy route to doing this, the formula would be just taking your monthly income, total monthly household income, whatever that is, times that by the total obligation ratio that you want to go with. So if you want to go with path number one here, maximizing your leverage, go with 36%. So whatever 36% is of your income, that should be your max obligations that you should have and that the lender is going to most likely go with. So you can't really exceed that. So whatever all your outstanding debts are and your home payment on top of that, that's your max obligation. So, and these are just ballpark numbers, by the way. Exact figures are obviously going to depend on, your specific obligations, which is why I say you need to do the math yourself to figure it out, because every situation is obviously different. The less obligations you have, the more home you can afford, obviously. And of course, the more obligations you have, the less home you can afford. So, and also as a bonus here, I put in here some other figures. If you don't have any debt at all and you're going to buy a home, it's a great place to be because these numbers shoot up tremendously. So if you have no other debt besides for a home payment coming up, or you already have, let's just go this routine again. $60,000 with no debt, you can actually afford a $275,000 home. Based on this scenario, 36% total obligations ratio. Now, if you want to go with the more conservative route, 30% total obligations ratio, you're looking at about a $225,000 home. Not too bad, considering it's practically double what we had on the board here. But again, most Americans have some sort of outstanding debt besides their home payment. So you have to factor that in here. This is talking about no debt. So again, with no debt going into a $120,000 income bracket, we're looking at a $500,000 home, $550,000 specifically, on the path number one here. And of course, path number two here, we're looking at about $450,000 home. So that's based on 120. Now, if we're going up to $180,000 income, no debt, just looking at the home payment, we're looking at it, you can afford about an $850,000 home, right, on situation number one here. And number two, you get yourself a $700,000 home. So that's that in a nutshell. And I am going to grab my chair, sit back down here. Okay, so that was a lot of information. But the last thought I'll leave you with here today is this. Obviously, there are many situations where people may borrow more than these amounts, but just because you're able to borrow a lot doesn't mean that you should. Being house broke is never a fun thing. Now, one thing I did not mention here was down payments. These scenarios on the board were pretty much based on the fact that you're doing a conventional 5% down and borrowing the majority of the amount. Obviously, the more liquid you are and the more money you put down, the bigger the home you can afford as well. And so when you start factoring in these larger down payments like 40%, 50%, or even larger, some of this information starts to become irrelevant and it's easier to buy. But the statistics tell us that the majority of typical homeowners are not buying their homes, the entire homes, with cash. They're typically putting down 20% or less, so a lot of this information should be relevant and helpful when getting ready to pull the trigger. All right, so hopefully you got some value out of this video today, and hopefully this gave you some more insights on things to consider when you go to make your next home purchase. And hey, maybe you know someone who's looking to buy a home, in which case, share this video so that they have all the ammunition they need to make the decision a little bit easier. So with all of that said, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.